بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على النبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you guys are all doing well, inshallah. As you can see from the title says everyone for themselves. Everyone for themselves. And inshallah, we're going to discuss something very important today with regards to this title and with regards to our deen, our religion, and our standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, in this dunya, as a Muslim, you have to be two things, right? You have to be selfless, and you also have to be selfish. You have to be selfless, and you also have to be selfish. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that a Muslim should always be willing to lend a helping hand. A Muslim should always be willing to sacrifice for the sake of others, especially sacrificing for the sake of his or her fellow brothers and sisters in Al-Islam, for his Muslims, for his Muslim brothers and sisters, and also for humanity in general. So a Muslim should always be selfless in that sense, but at the same time, a Muslim should also be selfish, right? You have to be selfish as a Muslim in regards to your standing and your position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? You have to be selfish in the sense that nothing should come between you and your obligations towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? The obligations you have to fulfill for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So from this, we have a principle which the scholars mention when they speak about the topic of al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, right? Fiqh maxims, principles, guiding principles and maxims. They say, الإيثار بالقرب مكروه. الإيثار بالقرب مكروه. They say that giving precedence to someone else, right? Giving someone else precedence over yourself in regards to something which brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is disliked. الإيثار بالقرب مكروه. Giving someone else precedence, letting someone else go ahead of yourself with regards to something which brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or with regards to something which brings closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, allowing someone to go ahead of you, giving someone else precedence, is an act which is makruh, right? It shouldn't be done. It shouldn't be done. And we'll read, inshallah, as we read, we'll understand that also doing something like this is considered haram. Considered haram in other instances, right? So he says here, al-itharu bil-qurbi makruh, giving precedence to someone else, specifically in regards to al-qurb, right? Something which brings you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allowing someone else to go ahead, right? Letting them go ahead of you in the line. In regards to something which draws closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and brings anyone else closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this action, the action of letting someone go in front of you, this action is makruh, is disliked and should be avoided. He says here, الإيثار بالقرب مكروه أي أن اختيار الغير وتقديمه على النفس في الأمور المتقرب بها إلى الله تعالى مكروه. Meaning, الإيثار بالقرب مكروه means is choosing someone else and allowing someone else to go ahead of you in regards to things which bring a person closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is makruh, that is disliked. You shouldn't do that, right? He says, قال الشارح رحمة الله عليه وقد يستدل لها بقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم, meaning something which can be used as a proof for this statement is the statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم in the authentic hadith where he says, ولا يزال قوم يتأخرون حتى يؤخرهم الله تعالى. أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. People, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم says, people will not cease to fall back and stay behind and lag behind until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts them behind. ولا يزال قوم يتأخرون حتى يؤخرهم الله تعالى. Right? People will not cease to lag behind and fall behind, right? Fall back and fall behind and lag behind They will not cease to do this until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put them behind and place them behind. So, and this hadith came in regards to filling the rows in the prayer, and filling the first rows, and filling the first row, and then the second row, and then the row that comes after that, right? And not to just stay in the back, right, and allow others to go and fill the rows ahead of you. He says here, أما غير القرب فالإيثار بها محبوب. As for things which are not, things which have nothing to do with getting closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Giving someone else precedence in something which has nothing to do with drawing nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, mahbub. That's actually recommended. Meaning giving someone else precedence in regards to something in the dunya, in regards to some wealth, in regards to some food, in regards to whatever it may be, as long as it's something that is not a means of drawing closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. Right? He talks about the Ansar, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the Ansar, and they give precedence over themselves, over their own souls, وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. Even if they're needy, even if they're in need of that themselves, they also give precedence. They still give precedence to the Muhajirin, right? And Al-Imam Al-Khatib Al-Baghdadi, rahmatullah alayhi, he speaks about this topic or this issue of not giving others precedence with regards to things which draw you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, وَلِذَا, he says, because of this, كَرِهَ قَوْمٌ, right? A group of scholars have disliked, right? Have ruled it to be disliked for a student to allow another student to take their place in regards to reading a book or reading upon a sheikh. Meaning the sheikh has a reader, right? For that person to give up, right, this position of reading to the sheikh and allow someone else to take that spot, right? They said that the scholars said this is disliked. This is disliked because he said reading knowledge, right, and studying and reading is an act of worship which you do, right, seeking to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thus, meaning if you allow someone else for no reason and with no excuse to take that away from you, then this is something which is disliked, and this is something which should be avoided, right? And also, the scholars go on to mention that there are instances where doing something like this is actually haram. Haram meaning, for example, if there's some water, right, and it's time for prayer, and this water belongs to me, right? This water belongs to me, and it's time for prayer, and there is no other water around, right? And we're a group of people, hypothetically speaking, or 2 or 3 people. For me now to offer this water, which I need myself for wudu, to perform an obligatory act of worship, for me to offer this to someone else and give it away to someone else and give precedence to someone else just like me, now this is actually haram. This is haram because now you're giving precedence in regards to something which not only is a means of drawing nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's in regards to something which is obligatory upon you. Yes, it's obligatory upon them. And it's obligatory upon that other person who you're trying to give precedence to, but at the end of the day, that water belongs to you, right? So you're in charge of that water, it belongs to you, right? So you are obligated to pray at that time, right? They don't have water, right? They have to figure out their own situation, whether they'll be able to find water, whether they'll make tayammum, etc. But you having water under your ownership, that you're not allowed in that moment to give that away to someone else, right? Because now this is considered something haram because it led to you not being able to fulfill something which is obligatory, right? Which is praying and fulfilling your obligatory prayer. Also, things such as a common scenario that comes up with this principle, which we see at the Masjid many times, is that a hole may come up in one of the rows in the Masjid, right, in the Jama'ah. So we're getting ready to pray. The Imam is saying, "Istaw, taqarabu, i'tadilu," right? Come close to one another, straighten the rows, fill the gaps, fill the holes, etc. And because of that, because people are filling the gaps and whatnot, a gap opens up in one of the rows. So what you'll see many people do is that you'll see that the people in the row behind the row which has that gap, they might point to one another. It might be like, "Tafaddal," right? Go ahead, brother. You go ahead. Or someone else will say, no, you go ahead, brother. This shouldn't be done. This shouldn't be done, right? What you should do is if you have the opportunity to go and fill that place, fill that spot in the row, ahead of the row you're in, then you should go and take that step, right? That doesn't mean that you gotta run there and give somebody an elbow or knock someone down and, to win that spot. But it just means that you shouldn't offer it to someone else, especially if it's directly in front of you. You have more of a right to step forward and to take that spot, right? Also, something else similar to this is that you may find people performing an act of worship, right? You may find someone performing an act of worship, and it's a means of them, getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But for one reason or another, they think it's good manners, and you're actually being humble by offering it to someone else, offering someone else this opportunity. But actually, this isn't something that should be done, and it's not something that's recommended, right? There's many ayat in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only commands us to fulfill our obligations and to fulfill good deeds, but actually commands us in a way where He tells us to rush. وَسَارِعُوا, right? Rush and run. فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ, rush and race to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ, literally race one another, right? To the good deeds and these righteous acts of worship, right? So generally speaking, giving someone else precedence when it comes to worldly matters or matters which are personal, things that have to do with you as an individual or that person as an individual, or things that have to do with the worldly life, then giving someone else precedence is fine. It's actually recommended, right? If somebody needs some money, right, you giving them precedence to the money in your pocket or some food you may have, that itself is an act of worship, right? So for example, let's say I have some food, right? I have some food and there's someone that's hungry, right? And I've eaten some of it, or let's say I haven't eaten any of it. Obviously it's COVID now, so people are not sharing their food after they touched it. So let's say I have some food and I see someone who's hungry, someone needs some food. Me giving them precedence to this food, right? I may be hungry, but I'm not starving, right? I can do without this meal, I'll survive. So me giving them this meal, right, it's recommended. Why is it recommended? Because first of all, the meal itself, me eating the meal, is not an act of worship, right? Unless, of course, you have the intention of this, this food giving you strength so you can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But generally speaking, you're just eating a meal. You're just eating your meal because you're hungry. So this itself is not technically an act of worship. So me giving it away and giving someone else precedence to this food, that itself is recommended because that action itself with the right intention is an act of worship. You guys get what I'm saying? While on the contrary, if you are performing an act of worship, and you give someone else precedence in regards to that act of worship you're performing, then this isn't something good, because now you've let someone else go ahead of you, in this race to Jannah. So, and on the day of judgment, all a person will have is the work that they performed, right? The good deeds that they performed and the hard work that they put forward. وَأَلَّيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. No one will have on the day of judgment except what they put forth, right? And each individual will come on the day of judgment فَرْدًا وَكُلُّهُمْ آتِيهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَرْدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Maryam that each person will come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala individually. You'll have what you did and the good that you performed. Of course, along with whatever good you may have encouraged others to do, and that will still be, will come under the good that you performed and the good that you did, even though it was performed by other people, because you guided other people to that. So in a nutshell, a person should be selfless, but at the same time should be selfish when it comes to the Akhirah and to their hereafter. And this doesn't mean that there should be any bad blood between Muslims when it comes to getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like I said, that doesn't mean that if there's a gap in the row in front of you, that if you see someone taking a step forward to take that spot, you should quickly come behind and give them an elbow or, knock them down. No, that's not what I mean. But it means that if there is an opportunity, take that step forward, right? Whether it's the gap in the row, whether it's maybe, a chance to be a reader for the shaykh during the lecture. If it's an opportunity to do something which is beneficial for a person in their akhirah, you should be the first to rush to that, right? And if you have the means to do it, if you have the means to perform it, you should not allow someone else to take that away from you, right? And if we all had this attitude, a lot more good would happen, right? A lot more khair would happen in our communities. A lot more good would happen within our ummah if we all had the same mentality with, clean hearts and not having any animosity for one another. But if we all competed to make it to Jannah and to perform these righteous acts of worship. It's just like, for example, with basketball, right? You don't want to practice on a team where no one's playing hard, no one's really running hard, the practice is pretty laid back, no one's really sweating. You don't want to practice like that. Because if you practice like that, how will you perform in the game? Right? If everyone on the team, no one pushes one another, no one D's up full court, no one, tries to block one another in practice, how is the team going to ultimately play in a game when they're facing another team? They're not going to play too well. They're not going to play too good, right? Because they didn't practice, they didn't work hard together, right? So how far can they really make it, right? So it's similar to that in the sense that if we all have this mentality, inshallah, like I said, with clean hearts and not having any animosity and not feeling that we're better than one another, if we perform a certain a certain deed or a certain act of worship, inshallah, you'll see the level of devotion and the level of performance within our communities and within our masajid and within our ummah. Inshallah, you'll see that all increase. Bi-idhnillahi al-kareem. So inshallah, I'll stop here for now. Anything that I said which is correct is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And anything which I said which is incorrect or a mistake is from myself and the shaitan. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وجزاكم الله خيرا.